Welcome, everyone. Good to be here and good to see you all. My name is Richard Waring. I've been running the PoemWorks reading series for a number of years. And I'd like to begin with a couple of quotes that I thought might be relevant to tonight's reading. James Hillman says, "Without stories, there is no pattern, no understanding, no art, and no character, merely habits, events passing before the eyes of an aimless observer, a life unreviewed, a life lost, the living of it."
I'm not sure.
I don't know if you've seen the wonderful TV series Dickinson, which is absolutely wonderful. A poem by Emily Dickinson is in each episode. And in one of the episodes, the maid says, she's Irish, "It used to be that in the old Irish wars, that the clans had an agreement that no matter how bloody the war became, no matter how many were slaughtered, they would always spare the poets. Don't kill the poets," they'd say, "because the poets had to be left to tell the story."
Wonderful.
Wow.
Nice brogue.
Thank
Yes.
you. And just in general, writing about trauma is more than simply documenting experience. It's about illuminating life on Earth. It's about transforming tragedy into art and hoping that somehow that piece of art may help someone else who's gone through something unbearable and who doesn't see that there's truly a light at the end of a dark tunnel.
Yes.
We have two wonderful poets featured tonight, and then several open mic readers afterwards. And I'd like to introduce Robbie Gamble, whose chapbook, "A Can of Pinto Beans," was recently published by Lily Poetry Review Books. His poems have appeared in the Atlantic Review, Poet Lore, Rhino, Spillway, and recently The Sun, among other journals. His essays have appeared in Mass Poetry, Pengarus, Scoundrel Time, Solstice, and the Tomaha Literary Review. Recipient of the Carve Poetry Prize and a Peter Taylor Fellowship at the Kenyon Summer Writers Workshop, Robbie holds an MFA from Lesley University and serves as poetry editor for Solstice, a magazine of diverse voices. Robbie worked for 20 years as a nurse practitioner with the Boston Healthcare for the Homeless, and now divides his time between Boston and Vermont. Please welcome Robbie.
Thank you, Richard. And I really appreciated those those words you had about poets responding to trauma. It feels like that's sort of what's going on right now. And I hope I can speak to that a little bit tonight. And thank you for sustaining the PoemWorks readings through all that's been going on the last couple of years. It's a real labor of love, and we all benefit from it. And I also really just want to acknowledge Barbara Helfgott Hyatt, who built the community that seems to be the core of this reading series, and for all the people that she has inspired and taught and sustained. I love that term barbarisms. I think that's really wonderful. And it's a joy to be sharing this space with Margot. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more of her amazing poems and the narrative of her healing. I think that's really important to hear, and how she survived things. And I also just want to acknowledge Cleary and the Lily Poetry Review staff, for all that they do for poetry and for publishing my book. I mean, it's this is my first very narrow volume, and it's really exciting to hold it in my hand and to be able to share it with you. So I'm going to start tonight. Joey Gould, who often comes to many events, he has a tradition of reading a poem del dia, something that he had written on something that they had written on the day of the reading. And I don't have anything that's quite that fresh, but I do have a poem de la semana, something that I wrote this week. And it is about Ukraine, because I think Ukraine is very much on our minds. It's called Ukraine, and I'll just dive in.
Mm.
Because frozen earth can shatter like glass. Because a marsh laced with isotopes. Because a cordite whiff lingers for generations. Because small arms stutter. Because calculations. Because hunger and power are unstable denominators. Because family and famine are two keystrokes apart. Because mother. Because geography. Because wheat fields withheld. Because wealth can be tallied in electrons, but conscience can't. Because skeletal remains. Because potatoes have eyes. Because we have four-chambered hearts, but only two echo the moon.
Mm. Wow.
Wow. Amazing, Robbie.
Yeah, I know I think we're all just trying to process. So I'd like to read some work from A Can of Pinto Beans, my new chapbook from a Lily Poetry Review. And just to give a little background, this book came out of a cluster of poems that I wrote. I for the years prior to COVID, I spent some time volunteering each summer on the Mexico-Arizona border, working with a group called No More Deaths, No Más Muertes, which is a group that supports migrants who are moving through that area through a very remote part of the Sonoran Desert, where it's very rough terrain, that it's 115 degrees in the summer, it's below freezing in the winter. And many people have died there. There've been a lot of remains found there of people who weren't able to make it through. And so we provide material support, water and food and things along the paths that people are known to take as they make their way north. And then we also maintain it's kind of a MASH field hospital that people know about, where they can come in for basic medical treatment if they need stuff. And so I worked for many years as a nurse practitioner, so I had some medical skills, and I also spent time in Central America, so I had some language skills. So it was a perfect fit for me, and a very moving place to be working. And of course, the area is very much, there's a lot of surveillance from Border Patrol and military and paramilitary folks. So there's just a lot that's going on. And the desert is also very austerely beautiful. So there's just a real melange of experience to be had there. And I wrote a few poems about it. Then Eileen Cleary encouraged me to sort of expand them into a book. And what I ended up doing was sort of building a collage from field notes that I kept there in a journal, and some poems, and some just some artifacts that people that one observes in the desert. And so it's kind of a scrapbook of impressions, and I'll read a few of the poems from this tonight. But I'd like to start by doing a territory acknowledgement, which is very important in this area, because the border between Arizona and Mexico is the traditional lands of the Tohono O'odham people. It's still their nation, and it straddles the border. And so the Tohono O'odham lands, it's bisected by the border wall, which separates the colonial settler nations of the United States of America and Mexico. And the Tohono O'odham people endure frequent overflights and incursions into their sovereign land by military and security forces. So it's important to acknowledge it's their land, and all the shenanigans that are going on it now. We're all incursions. These are all incursions on what is their land. And I'll start with a poem called Tectonic, which the other thing that's going on right now, in Ukraine is this incredible displacement of people, and I hear now it's over 1 million refugees in the last week or so, and added into the refugee crises on our southern border and through the Mediterranean and Africa and Eastern Europe. This is the piece that sort of talks about refugee movements. It's called Tectonic. Disturbed plates of raw humanity sliding across the globe. Quicksilver overlays on the crusted Earth's fault lines. There's no known seismographs to gauge these eruptions. We know, of course, that somewhere ethnic grievances throb, that droughts spread out across the lands, while economies are pumped up or plundered down. But then, surprise, a war breaks out, or ethnic cleansing, or blockades, or random chaos spills over, rumbles down hillsides, blood blooms through river deltas, executions, rapings, fire from the sky. And people begin to shift, expelled by forces as calculated as the Richter scale. They drift because they know their children are hungry and will be chewed up by machines. Bits of family, strangers holding hands, they come with unanticipated speed, in waves, on leaky rafts, on boxcars or blistered feet, on their last drips of adrenaline. Oh, puny border walls, did you believe you'd hold against the white-hot lava of their pain? Those few who escape, at least for a time, will lie down and breathe for a night, a beautiful, shining night, worn and disbelieving, until the next upheaval. So this next one is more specific to the Arizona borderlands, and this is called What the Uncles Say. Ay, Chema, those coyotes, they promised you this wouldn't be so hard, didn't they? Just a day's walk from the border to the highway, and then the van to carry you on to Phoenix. They took all your money, said, come quickly now, follow us, Chema. And Chema, we all know what happens after that. On your second day of walking, a helicopter drops from the sky, buzzes your group, and in the blinding dust and noise, those green-clad men on ATVs zoom in, they scatter you and hunt down stragglers. You flatten, lizard-like, behind some boulders and wait for dark all alone. Then it's day again, and canyon walls curve and twist like red rock curtains, hiding the distant mountains they said you should aim for. This sun, it just hangs all over you, refuses to blink or give direction. Chema, what will become of you? Wandering, and this thirst that tries to pull your throat apart. Maybe you will find a cattle trough thick with scum, and you will drink, then vomit all that is left in you. Perhaps you will come across a cache left by Samaritans, a jug of water, a can of beans to sustain you moving on. Perhaps a militiaman slashed that jug. Its brittle gallon shell mocks you in the dust. Or there will be nothing to find, nothing at all, and your weakened circle will wind down. Or else another patrol will grab you anyway, zip tie you up, fling you like roadkill back over the border, broke and thirsty to start over. So this next one, I included some logbook entries. I was in charge of sort of keeping track of some of the sites that we were leaving supplies at, and I found they sort of made little interludes through the book as sort of just kind of very compressed stories. This is logbook 2, waypoint number 5145. Found 4 gallons water, half emptied and full of wasps, 2 old blankets, 1 bucket used as a latrine. Left. 6 gallons water, 1 case of beans, 1 clean bucket of granola bars, Vienna sausages. Note, site was 200 yards further up the wash than expected. Hard to find. This next poem is called, it's an epistolatory poem. I wrote it at a Joiner Center retreat, and it's called Memo to the Border Patrol Agent Who Dumped Out the Water We Had Left in the Desert. I saw you hustle past in your green striped SUV, casting a huff of dust across our windshield. 10 minutes later, we got to the radio tower and the gallon jugs we had left for migrants were all poured out, the ground still shiny moist in 115 degrees of parch. These are the facts. And although this document is not binding, I have several questions. 1, do you understand what thirst is? A thirst for home so strong, a man will walk 90 miles under bone-bright sun to quench it. Not a death wish, not a martyr's pilgrimage, not a pension for Air Jordans or a welfare check or some Mickey Mouse accessories for his toddler daughter. Just a semi-safe place to work and live and work, fill a belly, harbor a family. 2, what does it profit you to be cruel? Did you thrill to the glug of the jugs, heaving their quench into the dust? How cozy is that government issue paycheck in your pocket? 3, and this one is kind of biblical, so listen close. Who is your neighbor? Who? You and I, and who else? The passports we both holster are embossed with the self-same spread eagle clawing at arrows and olive twigs. Such a coveted ticket. But plunk this in your trooper-shaved skull. We are the newcomers on this hemisphere, and the footprints you patrol have veined these continents for millennia, with no regard for turnstiles or trade quotas or zip ties or drone strikes or dreams of a wall drawn arbitrarily across the sand. And this next one is the title poem. It's called A Can of Pinto Beans. Just below the ridgeline saddle, tossed to the side of the trail, lying dented among rocks. Bleached label peeled back, and the downhill facing end of the can stabbed through by some Border Patrol agent's K-bar knife. A precise wound, moldering around the edges, with filaments wafting down the corners. No, they're streams of tiny ants crawling in and out, bearing flecks of nourishment away.
Wow.
This next one is called Moo. Sound effect. There is a tower on the edge of town, bolted to the concrete pad they poured, bone white columns craning for a panoramic view of the citizens' backyards, into the labyrinth of arroyos where migrants sometimes scattered through at dusk. They studded the scaffolding with vigilant devices, microphones, motion detectors, infrared cameras, all set to summer Border Patrol squads when tripped. They called it virtual fence and gave Boeing a generous $1 billion for a pilot project, planting a string of towers across the Aravaca sector. But the devices were triggered by dust storms, rain showers, even passing cattle, sending BP agents on frenzied roundups, ending in a moo. So they shut the system down, left the structures dormant, and cows now graze the mesquite groves in peace. This next piece is called Scapula. One afternoon, returning from a remote water cache, we spotted a scapula, a human shoulder blade, angling up from the sun-baked hard pan, stark white and triangular like a distant sail, motionless in the heat. No other bones lay about, so it must have been scavenged by an animal and dragged from the corpse, from one of the thousands of untended final resting places of bodies who have disappeared while crossing through the borderlands. We left the scapula undisturbed, filing by in a brief, inadequate moment of reverence. We marked the location as precisely as we could, so the county coroner might one day retrieve the bone with the audacious hope that they could link it to a known missing person, give someone's survivors a shred, closure, someone whose life was carved out, leaving only this.
Mm.
And this piece is called Hello Kitty Backpack, Ajo, Arizona. I came across you 12 miles from the nearest paved road. Prim magenta bow above one ear, unblinking face tipped up into the sun from your peppermint pink zippered pocket. Kitty, surely you must know all things in the desert fade and crack, but you seem serene, one paw raised, a demure shrug. It's 110 degrees today, hushed but for the pulse in my ears, the clink of a kicked rock. You are so petite. A change of clothes, a liter water bottle would overwhelm your empty belly. Kitty, I don't want to know the story of this destination. And as for your travel companion, and the last poem I'm going to read from the chapbook is called Figures. Ancient cave, cup of shade, a scoop in the canyon wall. The entrance littered with flattened cans of Red Bull, tattery t-shirts, a limp knapsack silvering in the sun. You can feel the fatigue of those who rested here. One more toehold on the claw toward El Norte. If they raised their eyes to the ceiling, they might have seen two ochre stick figures, hand in hand, looking down on them. How many centuries, how many passers-by, Odom people bearing squash and castor beans from Sonoran highlands south to the Gulf of California, returning with dried fish and labyrinthine baskets. Session of feet carving paths up and down. Cool of the evening, this generation will reshoulder their burdens, head past the sacred mountain on the left, northward towards the bulge of Kit's Peak, bristling with crazy gringo devices for watching and listening to the stars. And somewhere up there, a ship named Voyager, inscribed with a man and a woman and its path through the planets, slides further on from home. And I'll end with a poem we're in heavy times. We're thinking about a lot, heavy things. Trauma is definitely in the air. And this is a piece that I wrote actually on the day of the inauguration of the previous White House occupant when I couldn't watch. I sat down and wrote, and I think it sort of speaks to that moment, and it speaks to the present moment, and it's trying to be hopeful. It's not really titled, it's sort of a litany. Remain in the light, though it may waver. Remain in the gentle grasp of hands you trust. Remain open-mouthed, wide-eyed, arms spread to possibility. Though dark oceans are rising, remain afloat. Remain at your post, at the blackboard, on the shop floor, hand on the plow. Remain upright, remain in motion, remain ever on course. Remain gorgeous, remain lyrical, remain for the last encore. Remain outraged at the cruelties that gouge through our humanity. Remain for the casualties, chant their names in the streets. For all the barbed words that would hook you, remain thick-skinned. Shoulder your remaining hurt and empty, bring it with you. Foothold, slip, foothold, remain focused on ascending. Remain calm in the belly. Remain eye to eye. Remain sane. Remain.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Wow.
Very nice, Robbie.
Wow. Really wonderful reading. Just so inspired, and thank you so much for your perception of things that we only hear about in the news. You're on the front lines of really, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I want to let people know that later this month, on Monday, we're going to have Eric Hyatt reading from his work. Monday, March 21st. So I'll let people know about that as it approaches. And then coming up in April, actually April Fool's Day, we're going to have Brittany Perham and Robert Carr. So looking forward to that. And lastly, as a kind of special Mother's Day event, two young mothers, Julie Evan and Lisa Rua Ware, are going to read for us. So lots to look forward to. And now I want to spotlight myself and let Robbie out of this. Let me see. Where am I?
Richard, could I just make
Yes.
a comment? I wanted to tell, I just wanted to share that, Robbie, I used your poem Litany in my class at New Mission High School with my students because Mass Poetry was hoping that students would do their own Hard Work of Hope kind of poems. And so I used your poem as a kind of call and response and had them write off of each line, like spread out the lines
Oh,
and then had them do like a call and response with your poem. So I really, I loved hearing you read that.
oh,
So
thank you, Wendy. I would love. Do you have any of the responses? I'd love to know what they did.
I do. I probably have to ask permission from the
Sure.
students to share them, but we're going to ask them about that next week.
That's
Yeah,
a what a cool project.
it was a nice project. It was actually somewhat dismaying that a lot of them really only saw the dark. I must say, I mean, your poem was filled with hope, and they kind of, talk back to it.
Yeah. Oh,
But
that's
what
really.
if this? What if that? But it gives them a voice, gives them a way to say what's on their minds. So, in that
Mhm.
sense, I think it was really
Oh,
good.
that's really neat.
Thank you, Wendy. So it's my great honor to introduce Margot Wizansky, whose poems have appeared in many journals, including the New Ohio Review, Spillway, Cimarron, Missouri Review, and the Bellevue Literary Review. She edited Mercy of Tides, Rough Places Plain, and What the Poem Knows, tribute to Barbara Helfgott Hyatt. She won the Carlow University residency at the Isle of Innisfree, Ireland, and a Writers at Work Fellowship in Salt Lake City. She transcribed the oral history of her friend Emerson Stamps. His grandparents were enslaved and his parents were sharecroppers. Missouri Review in 2018 featured her poems about him. Her manuscript, The Yellow Sweater, was a finalist in the Ohio State University competition. Wild for Life, her chapbook, was published by Literary Poetry Review Books in 2021. Please welcome Margot.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate seeing so many of you. And it's wonderful to be reading with Robbie Gamble, who very generously wrote a beautiful blurb for my book, which is on the back. As I thought about this reading, which I planned a couple of weeks ago, My concerns seem very small. I haven't written a poem big enough for Ukraine, my motherland. My grandmother's family left in the late 1800s in time for her to be born in the US. I dreamed of going to Berdichev, their hometown, and now it's too late. My heart breaks for my cousins, for the horrific, unnecessary, and grotesque attacks they are enduring. I wanted to start with a poem by Mary Oliver, Lead, a poem to break our hearts and remind us to stay open to the suffering of the world. Lead. Here is a story to break your heart. Are you willing? This winter, balloons came to our harbor and died one by one of nothing we could see. A friend told me of one on the shore that lifted its head and opened the elegant beak and cried out in the long, sweet savoring of its life, which, if you have heard it, you know is a sacred thing, and for which, if you have not heard it, you had better hurry to where they still sing. And believe me, tell no one just where that is. The next morning, this loon, speckled and iridescent, and with a plan to fly home to some hidden lake, was dead on the shore. I tell you this to break your heart, by which I mean only that it break open and never close again to the rest of the world.
Gorgeous.
So I think most of you know that it's now 2.5 years ago that I experienced my near death. And this book, Wild for Life, which Lily Poetry Review has just published, is a chronicle of that experience and how I came back to life and came back to rehab. I'm only going to read 2 poems from that book. I must have been wild for life. I held fast to the tiniest bit, held on down to my very beginning. Because I felt no agonies, why was I not joyful? Why so quiet and so slow? Joy seizes the rising moon. Why wasn't I holding the other end? There's a black line on my chest, lumpy and scarred. The week of my coma, what was it, absence or sleep? Memory does not assail me. It was only my heart beating. Was I in my body, deep inside, or had I left? I can't let it in all at once. Just a small portion of blue sky and a yellow flower whose name I don't know. Half the garden died while I was recovering, and the other half greets me stiff-armed. I sit upright and watch the kind of TV that simply runs my mind. Was I supposed to have died? Did I? Was I brought back? I could have slipped over so easily, the thin margin visible to me now. Tonight, only poetry will serve after Adrienne Rich. Only poetry will fly among the planets, the stars, the new moon, and my unconscious. Awakened from coma, there's a Chernobyl in my throat, I said, a metaphor on my tongue. Only poetry will stand me up on a scallop shell, naked in my wavy hair, while the nurses shower me, scrub my back, and I hold on, grateful to be upright, oblivious to everyone elsewhere, standing or not. And only poetry will pull me word by word by word to the table where I write verb, noun, participle, sometimes a reckless adjective. I am returned.
And we're so grateful.
Thank you. Tethered. Sadness could be my conjoined twin, or a rough, insistent toddler pulling at me. Maybe I regarded my father more after he died. When he was alive, I never thought about him as a person, hadn't understood his disappointments, his sorrow, his humor or wisdom. Now he's with me always. Sadness spills over, insinuating itself into everything remarkable in my life. Children's births, grandchildren's, times I'm seized by longing. Sadness enhances me, churns me, like the roiling outside my window, fierce wind rousing whitecaps in the harbor. Was it windy like that the night my aorta burst? My unexpected survival, the long crawl back to awareness, and the full package of what I had to write. My almost death stays with me, this new part of me that never lets go.
Wow.
Consider this beauty. I'm walking under a sky dense with cloud cover. Sunset flames as the cloud breaks open. Stripes of water glimmer pure cerulean through a stand of evergreens. A few trees hold on to their brilliance. Ahead on the road, a buck turns to look at me while I listen to the great mortality on my phone, history of epidemics, hysteria, and blaming in the Middle Ages, and on to the centuries that followed. Jews caused the plagues, shoot them, burn them, no need for trial or even accusation. I pass my neighbor's truck parked behind a clump of golden grasses, sporting a sticker that rumbles and shouts like these: Trump is still my president. Liberalism is the real pandemic. As a former fetus, I choose life. Take your COVID vaccine and shove it. Hate connected underground like mushrooms extending across the country. Hate that can show its face anytime, drive its truck into a crowd. The earth chokes from the hate. I feel it in my bones as I walk lonely under that fiery sunset. In the yard, a swarm of swallows zigzags, gathering for the southward flight. All is quiet except the birds. I'm still in love with this world, how it goes on while we try so hard to trouble it.
Wow.
Now, this next poem is a pantoum, which has repeating lines, and I think you'll recognize it. First, poem with a line from Lucy Brock-Broido. For whom left am I first? For whom? Scrawny, jaundiced, my mother's first. I was snatched away, weaned by force at 6 weeks old. My mother's sick. Her friend took on my howling protests through the night. Scrawny, jaundiced, my mother's first. I was snatched away. Could she hear my cries from her hospital bed? Her friend took on my howling protests through the night. Our only guarantee, we'll lose the one for whom we're first. Could my mother hear my cries from her hospital bed? First for me, my tiny daughter, Firefly, who hardly roused to nurse. Our only guarantee, we'll lose the one for whom we're first. My daughter wailed whenever I lay her down. First for me, my tiny daughter, Firefly, who hardly roused to nurse. Couldn't she grow up fast, be independent, strong, not wail whenever I lay her down? First and clinging, she was sailing toward a loss. Couldn't she grow up fast, be independent, strong? I couldn't take much needy, wanting, holding. She was first and clinging, sailing toward a loss. These days, he's my first and I am his, but I still can't take much needy, wanting, holding. Weaned by force at 6 weeks old, my mother's sick. Isn't that what life does? Take the one who loves you best, and no one's left for whom you're first.
Mm. Actually figured that amazing weaving of words.
Grounded. Something mean I did to my little brother, no doubt. So awful I was at 15. My parents grounded me for 2 weeks, beginning the first day of the Allentown Fair. I didn't dare sneak out while they were at work. That much obedience left in me. Friends came to my bedroom window, and I had to tell them how I'd miss the midway, games of chance I'd never win, like ball in the bucket, stuffed animal prizes, even the freak show, people with too much hair in the wrong places, or tattoos all over, back when that was freaky. The tinkly music of the calliope I'd long outgrown, and the stale smell of popcorn, a whiff of dung from the 4-H tents, and corn dogs, sausage, fried dough, food that gave me low-grade nausea, aggravated by the rides, the terrifying roundup I wouldn't have to ride, whirled high and pinned against the metal cage with centripetal force while the bottom dropped out. I tried everything, pushed myself to be brave, never admitted to fear. Mostly we wandered the fairgrounds to see which boys from our class were wandering too. The fair was magic, lights so bright, everything just outside the grounds was thrown into deep darkness. Where the carnies lived in caravans, I imagined, ready to move on.
Mm.
Ode to the enemies in my garden.
Mm.
Every year I plant my garden with hope. Starter plants, seeds, Thai basil, tarragon. Watch every day for the miracle of sprouts. Do what I think I need to do to keep my enemies at bay. Drop fox urine from Poland around the perimeter. Hang mesh bags of garlic. Finally put up a 7-foot fence. They come as if Beatrix Potter had summoned them. Nutkin or Tiggywinkle, carrying a basket of spoiled gleanings, snap peas, a green tomato with a huge bite missing, the tender lower branches of cedar, even new hydrangea buds. The graceful, feathered, furred, striped, antlered, the tiny, huge, and in between, the bold and furtive, fast, and always quiet. the flyers, crawlers, amblers. They don't know mischievous, good or bad. They don't know wild food or cultivated. They don't know taking or stealing, only eating to go on. I never see them do it. Only a deer, still and staring with her big soft eyes. A chipmunk scurrying into the stone wall. A bird on a wire singing its heart out. The hornworm, the tomato hornworm, stands alone, unbeautiful. Spiral pleated body, hard to differentiate from the stem, its green color the same. And the tiny thing eats voraciously. I can hear it chewing. Praise to my son-in-law who comes running when I scream, grabs the worm, squashes it with his foot. The bright green of that death splashes his white overalls. Not a tragedy, the hornworm's death. Not a tragedy, my garden destroyed again. They're not taking from my plate. This is extra for me, what they need more than I do. Each plant, theirs for the stripping. I should be consoled.
I don't know about that. I don't.
Nick of the Flying Walendas, remember them? Nick Walenda walks a 2-inch cable across Hellhole Bend, sweating, uneasy. No safety net, nothing between him and death but those 2 inches. His flexible leather shoes, screw pins, stabilizer cables. He's shackled a 1/4 mile of the world and strapped it down. He keeps walking, balance is never still. And sometimes he kneels down for a second to regain it as the wind buffets him. How precise he must be. Everything he does is resistance to emptiness. Does the crowd come to see him cheat death? I'm terrified of heights. Can't look down from a mountain ridge or the upper seats in a stadium. Why am I watching him? He's a trickster, creating terrible danger from thin air when the world does that for us. Tidal waves, tornadoes, volcanoes, hurricanes. We call them natural disasters as though something's pastoral about them. Nick's danger is expensive, manufactured, almost mocking those who have no power to decide. Please, Jesus, thank you, Jesus. Tell me to relax, Lord. If he falls, what will that say of faith? He offends me, the offhand way he regards death. A crowd gathers at the canyon. One of his children, a small boy, sits right up front, lowers his head almost to his lap. And this is my penultimate poem. My old friend has died. I wouldn't even dress for school until I knew what Nancy was wearing. We egged each other into small delinquencies, hit our neighbor's lawn ornament, a ceramic sleeping Mexican, spiked our 7-Ups with whiskey after school. We laughed nonstop at everyone else, mean and gasping, smoked Winston's and played pinochle in the basement. I bet my babysitting money, 50 cents an hour. In the laundry room, we took turns necking with our boyfriends, hated our mothers in vicious, bottomless need. Nancy's father was a martinet in his tiny kingdom. He said hardly a word to her, then disappeared forever. My father showed us how to make Tom Collinses, didn't even need a bar guide. We giggled at his jokes. We went on to fall into heart-blinding, reckless, stupid love. Nancy held that part of who I was. She took my history when she died. I don't know what to do with hers.
Beautiful.
And I'll end with exaltation.
Hmm.
Every day, the rapture of birds, sunset approaching in red velvet shoes, leaving prints where the sky touches water. That radiance reflecting on the sea's flatness, dark blue-violet streaks I want to plunge my face into. Improbable red blazes on the west side of every tree, fades to dust, the ordinary story of night beginning, and soon the moon, the shiver of stars. Once in Oxford, I heard the Magdalen College boy choir, the only time I felt exaltation in a chapel, those ruby bright, unbroken voices praising, no matter who they praised, their clear madrigals soaring past a multitude of polychrome saints, scaling the Gothic arches to a place I'd never been, a place where I might fly. Thank you.
Beautiful, Margot.
Really.
So wonderful. So happy you are continuing to sing these songs. And I'm glad that someone else also has a poem in which the word pinnacle appears. I played with a Braille deck with my blind grandfather.
Oh,
Fond memories of that.
amazing.
But tell us a bit more, if you would, about your connection with Ukraine.
I feel bad that I never explored my connection. My grandmother was born here, and we knew that she came from a town called Berdichev or Berdicheva,
Hmm.
and I thought it was near Odessa, but it wasn't. It was in the north,
Hmm.
and I always thought someday I'd go there.
There's a famous Hasidic rabbi who came from there.
Really,
Wow.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's
Rabbi
supposed to
Nachman.
be a beautiful place, but
Hmm.
that's all I know.
Thank you so much. Wonderful reading.
Yes.
I want to start out the open mic portion by bringing a poem by Barbara Helfgott Hyatt into the room. And this is from her book that will be published this year by Lily Poetry Review Books. Her book is called Come Thunder. And this is a poem that Pam Jen has loved, and you can get a take on her reading of it on YouTube. The River Dure. I have come to suffer the bark-streaked world where toads call out in the river dark, all that effort to find one another, waiting wetly on river stones. The Dure renews itself by that sound, time taking itself so seriously. I will stay and be made of staying. Let the river, let the cold. There is too much world to fail. I will sleep the night, glad to be sleeping, glad to wake myself like always, like never before. No whispers, no breath on my neck. Let love wait like an umbrella in its stand. There may be no rain. There may be no need.
Thanks, Richard. Wow, that was great to hear.
With that, I'd like to introduce Steve Nickman.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you, Robbie and Margot, for your beautiful work. I had a grandfather who came from Odessa, I want to mention. And I can also say Barbara Helfgott-Hyatt and I both graduated from Atlantic City High School.
Wow. Wow. That
We
is
weren't
awesome.
there, we weren't there at the same time. I got there first. And the other thing I just want to say briefly is there was a TV, HBO series called Boardwalk Empire about Atlantic City
Yeah.
during Prohibition. So this is called Reviewing a Life After Watching Boardwalk Empire. I like the way I play Bach badly on my Baldwin upright, though I do tend to kill bonsai that never misbehaved. What can I expect since I grew up without grandfathers? I've done okay overall. I have a whole shelf of children's autobiographies. A bodhisattva I bought from Napoleon's great-great-grandson. My parents are contained in red filing boxes and refuse to be interrogated. My mother won't tell me why she gave all my letters back. She had high hopes for me. Maybe she thought my biographer would need them. My father, in his army fatigues, advances toward me, carrying flower pots as I take his picture, resolute, as though I'd better step aside. Still, I hold against him that in summertime we never soared together with the gulls and terns over the beach in Atlantic City, dropping clams from our beaks onto the rocks, swooping down in a light wind in perfect fellowship under sun and clouds to eat the sweet meat.
Wow. Very nice. Thank you, Steve. Next up, we have Jonathan Abel.
Very good. What an evening. Thank you, Richard, for organizing this. And Robbie and Margot, those are just remarkable readings. So I picked out a poem that one of Margot's reminded me of. It's called Dawn Dripping. I should rise, I should soar in reflection, easy as the sun kicks off the horizon. Instead, rain falls in my head. Out the window, the gray rain light stomps through my eyes, feeling fragile, certain if I tilt my head just so, something will shatter. I can barely fold myself in my upright body.
Wow. Thank you, Jonathan.
Is the light too bright for you? Shall I turn the light down?
Yeah, I think it was, and when you bring them on, when you come back.
And here we have Carrie Loftman.
Good, good.
Hello. Hi. Margot and Robbie, I have heard some of your poems before, but I hear something new every time. So thank you so much. They're beautiful. And if I were braver, I would read a poem I wrote to Ukraine this week, but it's only half baked. So I'm really, I'm going to read a poem that I think I finally finished after 5 years. So here we go. The Mercy Seas. My mother sits in a nursing home wheelchair, one leg dangling, a useless rudder. Her cheeks are a polymer pink, flushed from morning rounds with nursing aides. Like Odysseus marooned, she pines. Whose country have I come to this time? These girls here are mean. We've broken up her apartment into flotsam, rewritten her history's end. We measure tides in talcum powder and lost laundry. Her body is a bruise. Thin legs no longer hold her weight. Still, she insists on going. unwisely and enraged. All she wants is to poke us sly. Instead, she slaps my hand away. Don't need your help, damn it. It is her wheelchair, so she'll spin us outdoors to the courtyard to watch a spasm of sparrows at the feeder, puffed up, feather proud. They're beating wings, sharp knives to hunger. Who are they, these sly ones, she says. August plays chiaroscuro on the veins of her hands. Swollen indigo tracks to a choking heart. Slowly she blinks and slowly exhales. Do you like my hair? This time at least I thought it would take a curl. It's beautiful. Blue silver, a cloud.
Wow, nice.
Beautiful.
And next up, a poet whose name I love pronouncing, Kanamana Wadsworth.
Thank you. This is I can't say it's my poem, but it is. These are lines from a reading by and for the Ukrainian citizens during the war. And there was this Zoom with them this afternoon and then one 2 days ago. And it was heartbreaking to hear these poets who have so much power in their belief to resist, that they can actually resist the Russians. And so much of what they said was so powerful. I found myself writing lines that they had said, and I put them together. This is what I have. Into the polished tree shadows. Ukrainians have been invisible, like an unheard radio station. The world is blind to past events, flutes of grief, broken mouths. There are no roads for cowards here. What do they want? We are given false promises. We are writers without words. Restoration is a note of music to the heroes who have died. Ukraine is on fire. I must go to meet my war. The Russian dogs of war, it doesn't stop. When it does, the cameras leave for another war. Who remembers? Everything grows in spring. What is good for a tune, I ask. While you sleep, you can't die. In the country of the living, making a meal out of nothing. How are my children? Let me live till midday, tormented by rage. We drink our bullets. I won't live the next day. Everything is interrogation. Fear, most, the blind complacency.
Very powerful. Wow. No road for cowards here.
Oh,
Unbelievable.
the power of those people is unspeakable. It's just so moving.
Mhm, mhm. Next up, we have Wendy Drexler.
Kanamara, that was amazing. And thank you, Robbie and Margot and Richard. Really wonderful words tonight. I'm not going to read a poem of mine either. I don't have one really that speaks to the moment. But Robbie put me in mind to read this poem, which I really love. It's called Letter Found in a Crate. It's by Francis Santana. Dear Border Patrol Officer, You chased me into the broiling landscape. Fear drove me like the low winds of a storm. I got away from the unclaimed dust. I want to apologize for not giving us a chance to sit under the acacia black brush and talk about what it means to be on the inside of a line that moves like a fat belly. I wonder what kind of wisdom is codified inside your handbook. Is there a catalog of lost tongues? Are tribes tracked by the displaced mile? Is there a blacklist for boys who disregard space? But never mind all this. I'm writing to see if we can find a way to change the same old story. Let's sit. We have grown inside each other like the woodworm. But our daughters, they jump rope in the same backyard. Perhaps they hold the key to what we are. Perhaps they mean amplitude the way we mean fence. I have to go now. Should start picking all the ripe oranges.
Wow.
Wow. Thank you, Wendy. And now here is Cynthia Barker.
Thank you, Richard. This is the first time I've ever braved an open mic at a PoemWorks reading, but I'm really grateful to be here and to have heard Robbie and Margot. I've heard some of them before, and like somebody, it's just great to hear them again. Beautiful work, and there's such a relationship between the things that you're talking about and the things you're doing. So I'm going to read this poem. It's called "My Aunt Talks to Sylvia Plath," and there's an epigraph: "What the sluttish rutted sea could do," from Sylvia Plath's Point Shirley. Your sluttish rutted sea churned up trouble for our families. Some call Winthrop by the Sea a fitting childhood home for you. Your words embalmed with moist and misty beach breaths, razored like the clams we love to dig. I left behind little proof of that place fitting or not fitting. Your grandmother's Point Shirley geranium bed with a hurricane-pounded shark startled 6-year-old you, while a mile away and 3 years older, I watched tall pines sway, dip, crack in my front yard, hosters airborne, their leaves like propellers on the planes whose lights we both craved, landing nightly at Logan. After the storm, did I push you on the swing at Ingleside Park? Did our mothers, Dorothy and Aurelia, nod, never speak, each already afraid? When the bell rang, I believe it was you who chased me up the hill to the Willis School. I chose to die during an August heat wave. You may have heard it was gas.
Wow.
Thanks.
That was your
Thank
cousin.
you, Cynthia. And now a fellow poetry reading series curator, Timothy Gager.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to read something that it's a found poem. I was in a meeting and I was, rudely texting someone else, but something came up that I actually started listening to the person talking. When I looked down, my phone had done speech to text in some very twisted ways. So I left the phone on the rest of the meeting, and then I kind of picked and pulled at it and ended up with this poem.
Wow.
God and You. The first time I was ever in the higher power of God, not running my own life, I thought Maya Angelou never needed anyone in charge. She just needed to turn the page. I was on my knees by then. I closed my mind immediately and hard. I needed, really, really needed an outside perspective to know what's the best for me. While working on the farm, God was supposed to do that. He did nothing but make me laugh. That's not a good God. I was reminded that I saved a 3-letter name beginning with G. 2, take a trip if you want to come up to celebrate 6 a.m. It's been 20 years since we stayed in Yellowstone. And yeah, I'm still struggling, maybe 9 months, 6 months, 3 months. 1 month is when you're coming. I love you even with that mouth. Can you hear me at this distance saying, I don't need people. I can stay in my room. I don't have to be that person anymore. And I don't even think I'll be saved when the droplets from a waterfall are no longer music at 6 a.m., observing the heights and depths of a prayer at a geyser. What else is here but that?
Oh,
Wow. Powerful. Thank you. Well, I'd like to end our open mic with a poem of my own. You see, I'm not just a host of these series, but I'm also a practicing poet. And this poem is inspired by one of the poems that Robbie read. I've chosen this because of the structure of one of his poems. It's called Data Requiem. Because icebergs calved, because polar bears, because 2 pristine rivers, because government created sacrifice zones, because fields of study shredded, because drinking water, because we didn't hear dog whistle messages, because an environmentalist lit himself on fire, because, for instance, the coral reefs made a diver cry for an hour right into her mask, because writing about nature in terms of loss, because only one golden toad, because we were such a smart invention.
Really good.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Well, please unmute yourselves and let's have a bit of talk here. This has been a very moving evening.
Mm.
I would like to thank Robbie for his wonderful, wonderful poems about the migrants and their struggle and how oblivious we tend to be towards other people's struggles. And Margot's profound grasp on the importance of her life is so tender and powerful at the same time. So thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
Well, Connemara, that poem that you hobbled together, unbelievable. The strength and fortitude of these people is just stunning the world.
I don't know if what I did was okay in terms of borrowing people's words. It all was too fast to give any names that went along with it. But everything was just so felt. It was raw. And how can you sit in a basement on Zoom and read poems while your kin are being obliterated?
And if I may, as an intruder, offer,
Yeah.
I read that first. And I saw a little piece that was off to the side. And I thought, there has to be a place in this poem somewhere. And she said, oh yes, well, that's the title of it. So she didn't waste a word.
Excellent.
And I loved it. I loved it.
Right, that's good.
You know, I'm reading a book called The Splendid and the Vile, Eric Larson, and it's about the conflict between Churchill and Hitler. And
Right, I read it.
there's just some devastating words in there. One of which, you know, we all love the full moon, but he talks about the dread moon, the bomber's
Mhm.
moon, the moon that
Right.
illuminates targets.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
with war, everything just turns upside down. What is beautiful becomes ugly.
Yeah.
Connemara, I wanted to say your piece, it's kind of like a cento where you take, you know, a line from different poems and construct a new work out of it. It's sort of like yeah, it's very much a, you know, a cento from a live performance.
Huh.
I think it's a totally legitimate and very moving process. I thought it was very cool.
Where does the cento come from?
It's a form. I mean, you'll the people. It's kind of like it's a form of found poetry where people you
Okay.
take lines from different poems and stack them together. You can look it up.
Okay,
But
thank you.
that's
You know
that's
what?
essentially what you've done.
Connemara, you could type it up and send it to Rattle. Readers respond.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Call it cento, call it, or have the title and then under it say a cento.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In Poetry Workshop Biz Talk, we call that type and send.
Yeah.
That's right.
Type and send, and then edit afterward.
No.
Well,
I would
I have a
to beg it.
friend who, my only friend who's been in the New Yorker magazine, and she sent a bunch of poems and then one that she hadn't quite, you know, worked out, and that was the one that they took.
Of course.
So sometimes when the icing is still soft, it gets taken.
What
Right.
do they know after all?
Wow. Very good.
She just left.
You know, and it's interesting how occasions create a kind of urgency. And it felt to me like almost everything that was read tonight fits the moment.
Right.
Mhm.
Hmm?
Yeah.
Like the maid said in Dickinson, you know, don't kill the poets.
Yeah, right.
They have to tell the story.
Well, there's living proof in the Ukraine.
Mhm.
You're the storytellers.
Right.
Hmm.